kitchen, the cabin, and around the world, this is Voices from the Solitude, a podcast about the coronavirus and gaming. Today, I'm talking to Jamey Stegmaier about Stegmaier Games' coronavirus policy. So, I'm here with the owner of Stegmaier Games. Needs no introduction, Jamey Stegmaier. Jamey, how are you? Are you well?
I am. I'm doing okay, Ben. Yeah, thank you for asking. And for I'm sure there might be people who don't know who I am in the industry. I run a company called Stegmaier Games, and we're known for games like Scythe and Wingspan and Viticulture.
And we spoke briefly before we started recording, but you said you've been self-isolating now for a few months. How has that affected your life? Because I guess you work from home, so I guess that's not such a big upheaval, no?
That's correct. Yeah, the direct impact on my personal life has been, at least physically, has been minimal. Emotionally and psychologically, it's a very weird time for everyone, regardless of how it's affected you. So that has been weird. But I do work from home. My girlfriend also lives and works from home, so we have been able to continue most of our daily routines normally. Yeah. How about you? Has it affected you personally?
Thankfully, my work wasn't cancelled because I teach at a university, and sort of 2 days before term was due to start, I got an email saying all lessons are cancelled at the university. And being a freelancer, I thought, well, fantastic, it's a whole semester worth of work gone. But an hour later, they wrote, but you can do your lessons online. So it was only an hour that my heart was in my throat, basically. So what I've got you on to talk about is essentially you wrote a blog post regarding Stegmaier Games and the coronavirus and how it's affected the company. So firstly, I when I've interviewed you before, I asked you about conventions, and you said that conventions aren't really part of your marketing process. So firstly, why is that? And secondly, so to what degree has all the conventions been shut down affected Stegmaier? I guess less than other companies, yeah.
Yeah. Conventions take a lot of time. You have to prepare for a convention. You're organizing tons of things to get ready for it. That takes a lot of time to get there. It takes a lot of time and energy, especially for an introvert like me, to actually run anything at a convention. And the resource cost, other than time, is also very high. And there are lots of ways that I love connecting with the gaming community and the people who support our products. And whenever I'm at a convention, I do love those interactions, but actually getting there and doing it takes a lot of willpower for me and my co-founder, Alan. And so we kind of decided early on that there were so many other ways that we were pretty good at connecting with people that we just wouldn't make that a key part of our marketing strategy. So over the past few years, our strategy has been that there's a convention here in St. Louis that is basically just a come and play games for 4 days convention called Geekway to the West. I love that convention because I can just go and play games for 4 days. And I do try to play with a wide variety of people on there. I don't just stick with my friend group because I do use that as a networking device to play games with a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be able to play games with me or vice versa. So that's one. And then Gen Con, we've partnered with MeepleSource over the last few years, where MeepleSource essentially runs a dual booth. It's under the MeepleSource name, but they do a lot of stuff for Stegmaier Games at their booth. And so that has maybe been one of the bigger ways that Gen Con being canceled has impacted us, because they do sell a lot of our products at that booth. And it's a good place we were going to showcase our only new game of 2020 there. And so that has... It's just kind of it's been wiped clean, and that isn't something that will happen this year.
And so moving on then, you talked specifically, very few people I think are quite so open about the internal processes of the company as you are, and you spoke about how gearing up for the holiday season you've had to change your idea towards distributors. So firstly, what is that change, and secondly, what is that reasoning behind it?
Yeah, so normally for a game publisher like Stegmaier Games, we don't get much information from distributors until we've actually made the product. Distributors don't really want to hear from publishers 8 months before they can actually get the product. And it usually 8 months might be a bit of an exaggeration, but for a reprint, it takes around 3.5 months to print it, and then another month and a half to freight ship it. And so it's at least a 5-month lead time. And so typically I guess on how many copies of a product that we need, and I make that many, and then I go to distributors 5 months later and I say, hey, we have 5,000 copies of this game. How many do you want? But this year, there's just so many uncertainties, especially with the coronavirus, that I wasn't really comfortable doing that for the holiday season. I didn't want to make a huge holiday print run and then have distributors buy 20% of it. And I also didn't want to make the wrong products. I didn't want to play that guessing game. And so a little differently this year, I went to distributors up front. Something I've done at different times in the past, but this was a big different time for me to do it. And I said, hey, I will make whatever you want me to make. You don't have to pay me any money up front. I will just tell me what you want, commit to it, and I'll make it for you. But I'm probably not going to make a lot more than that. So this is your chance to order for the holidays. And some of them took me up on it, and some of them didn't.
And what was the reaction amongst people? Was there outrage? Was there sort of people say you can't expect us to do this, or were people sort of understanding about it?
Well, it was an indirect solicitation. I work through a distribution broker, and so the broker was the one that actually made that solicitation and heard back from many of the distributors. I got some direct emails. I was CC'd on some of them, and at least the ones that I was CC'd on, they were fairly normal responses. They just placed an order. There wasn't any compliments for me asking, and there also wasn't any anger at me for me asking. I am guessing internally there were probably some distributors that grumbled a little bit because the same uncertainty that I'm facing is the same uncertainty they're facing too. And so I am in some ways passing on some risk to them when I'm asking them to commit to that print run. And I get that. It's a risk that I normally take, and they're having to take it here, and I can see why they may not be happy about that. And
so you mentioned that your usual process is you take an educated guess at how many copies of a game you're going to need. And, it's been part of the internet dialogue that your guess was off by, I think, an order of magnitude when it came to Wingspan. How has the success of Wingspan changed your attitude with regards to those educated guesses that you make now?
Well, yeah. So, the brief version of that story is that I didn't know how Wingspan would do. I loved the game. I was very involved in the development process. I loved what Elizabeth did with the design. And I was fairly confident it would do okay. Or do even fairly well if people actually gave it a chance and played it. But I didn't know how gamers would, hobby gamers in particular, if they would even give it a chance, given the theme. And so I went to a few distributors the summer of, I think, 2018. And I said, we've got this bird-themed Euro engine building game. How many do you think we should print? But I didn't give them a lot of information. This is some of the mistakes I made. I give them basically what I just told you. And I probably downplayed it a little bit because I didn't want to oversell it and end up with too many copies. And all those distributors came back and said, I'm guessing around 10,000 copies, make 10,000 copies. And so I did. I made 10,000 copies. And that turned out to be far fewer than we needed. Wingspan by the end of this year will have sold over 500,000 copies in many different languages. So that guess was way off. I have since then really changed that process and given distributors and even some retailers a lot more information up front to help with that guessing game so that we can be better informed. I do want to mention real quick, on the flip side of that coin, though, is still the fear that we will make too many copies of a game that can't sell or doesn't sell for a long, long time. And that has happened with a game that I thought was going to for sure be a hit, and that was Between Two Castles. I was fully confident that it would do extremely well. I made 20,000 copies of it in the first print run, and we are still selling through those 20,000 copies. And that was over 2 years ago. And so I don't want that to happen either. So it's still that guessing game is such a big challenge. I think I've gotten better at it, but I still see both sides of the coin there, where I don't want to make too many, and I also don't want to make too few. And honestly, I'd rather make too few and then make more than make a ton of games and have them sit in a warehouse for 2 years.
And so Wingspan, I've never heard a game spoken about as much as Wingspan amongst gamers. And there's a lot of scratching of heads, and it's nothing towards Wingspan's quality or not. It's just people are scratching their heads as to why it is so overwhelmingly successful and has been the dominating title over the last sort of 18 months. Being someone on the inside, what do you put its success down to?
Yeah. I wish there were a magic formula, because I would do it again if I knew exactly. But I think it's an amalgamation of a few different things. One is that for any game, I think if it reaches a critical mass, if it's a solid game and it reaches a critical mass of people, then it spreads exponentially from there. We're exposed to games in different ways, and if a game gets to the table with a certain number of people and people know how to play it, and the game has replayability, then it's just going to be played over and over again. Every time I play Wingspan, I mean, I play our games a lot, and I am still continually drawn to the game, because every time I play it, there's this sense of I'm very satisfied by what I'm putting together in the game, both the engine building and just looking at my tableau of birds. There's this collector's element in me that I think a lot of gamers share, that I've collected this unique set of birds and a unique combination in a unique order, and it feels good. There's something just pleasant and good that I feel every time I play it. And that's just me, but I wonder if a lot of other gamers feel the same sense of satisfaction when they play it. Not to mention all the birders who weren't gamers before Wingspan, who have been invited into the hobby via the game. Do you have any theories? I mean, what am I missing there? That's a big deal.
I vacillate. I think what I'm confused. I'm not confused that the game is successful. What confuses me is not confuses me. That sounds wrong. What I'm surprised by is the external interest, the fact that it's been on BBC Radio 4, the fact that it's been in the New York Times, NPR, all of this sort of stuff. And I guess it's a combination of a number of things, but I also think the way the game looks is so engaging that people are drawn to it regardless of gameplay. And that's not to say the gameplay, I think the game's great, but when people see that really striking cover, and, everyone talks about how the rule book feels and how the little eggs are, it feels... Games are not just mechanics. They are also tactility. They are also look. And I think what Wingspan is something that has gone through the nerdy aspect of gaming. People don't look at Wingspan and think, oh, this is a thing for nerds. They think, maybe this is the thing for me, right?
Yeah. I like what you just said on multiple levels. Both the people who have gotten close enough to the game to actually open the box and feel it and touch it and look at it. And also the vast number of people out there who aren't an active part of the gaming hobby at this point, and they see the box, like you said, and it maybe changes their notions of what a board game looks like. It's a little unexpected. I think, before anyone gets into the hobby, they have a preconceived notion of what a board game is and what a modern board game looks like. And Wingspan doesn't really look like that. And so maybe that is something striking and memorable and different that makes them at least curious to learn more.
I mean, it looks like a lifestyle object. It looks like something that could rest quite happily on a coffee table, as opposed to something where people associate games to be Monopoly or, a picture of an orc with an axe in their hand, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the orc, yeah.
So, just to wrap up then, away from Stegmaier generally, as someone who I think takes an interest in the industry as a whole, not just as a publisher, but someone who has an interest in the gaming industry, what effect do you see the coronavirus having in the short, medium, and long term to the industry?
Short, medium, long term. Well, short term, I think, is what we're seeing right now. Some things are good. I think probably at least some publishers are experiencing better direct sales through their web store if they have a web store. They're also, I think publishers are probably struggling to playtest and maybe moving online to playtest, which brings its own struggles. In the medium term, I would say through the rest of 2020, I am curious. I don't know exactly. I think I don't know. I'm very curious to find out myself, and this is one of the reasons that I had such uncertainty about the holidays. Because from one perspective, the holidays are generally good, no matter how the economy is on any given year. But I think some of the short-term boost, at least in the U.S., where unemployment rates were way up, and the government helped a little bit, gave people a little bit of money, let people delay their taxes and things like that. I think those short-term efforts probably help people a little bit. But if those jobs don't come back come the holiday season, a lot of people are really, really going to be struggling. And I think non-essential items like board games will probably be one of the things to go. At the same time, there are industries that are going to be hit harder, like the movie theater industry. That could really have a huge long-term impact, because people might be scared for a long time to gather in a tight space with a lot of other people. Whereas board games don't have that challenge. You can play that at home with the people that you already know and trust, and whose social circle you trust. So that's my medium term. Long term is even more uncertain. I think a lot of small gaming businesses will probably go out of business. But I think others will survive and do okay. I think it will be tough for any board game company to truly thrive over the next year or so. I think we'll just kind of be doing our best and hanging on for a little while. What did I miss there? What do you think? Do you have any theories about short term, medium term, long term?
Business is a complete closed book to me, and so I can talk about the relative merits of something as a work of art or something engaging, but predicting business trends is not within my wheelhouse, unfortunately. So just one final question then. Would you say you are optimistic for the next 2 years of gaming, or are you cautious?
Oh, I'm definitely cautious, but I'm always cautious, even without a worldwide pandemic. So I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. I have hopes that, from a medical perspective, that there will be a cure. I'm optimistic that people will continue to be responsible in the way that they prevent the spread of the disease, and I'm optimistic there will be a vaccine. I do think there are certain areas that I've mentioned before, and anything like the movie theater example relating to conventions, board game conventions. I think that will have a big shape for a big impact on the industry for a while. And maybe the next time there is a Gen Con, even if people are completely comfortable going there, there might be a big dip in attendance, and same with Essen. But I think I'm optimistic that in the long run we'll be okay, and that people will be okay, and that the world will be okay.
Brilliant. Well, an optimistic note to end on. So thank you, Jamey, for your time, and hopefully you'll be able to get out into the real world at some point soon.
I hope so, and I hope the same for you, Ben.
If you want to support content like this, you can go to patreon.com/5G4D. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, and if you can, stay at home.